I want to talk about Trump's new plans to help the infrastructure. This was suggested by Patreon supporter AlexTalk, and it's an article that was actually an interview that was in the realnews.com with Dean Baker, who is the co-director for the Center for Economic and Policy Research in Washington, D.C. He's the author of the book Rigged: How Globalization and the Rules of Modern Economy Were Structured to Make the Rich Richer. So I'll put the link to the interview below. Realnews.com does a great job. They'll show you the video interview, and then they also just have a written transcript below it so you can kind of go back in and see everything that they're talking about. Basically, it's going into, so Trump, during his campaign, talked about, I'm going to put $1 trillion into the infrastructure. I'm going to make it the best, the toppest of the most infrastructure that's the best of the best, or whatever. He is now talking about spending $200 billion on the infrastructure. And, you know, this guy, Dean Baker, does a great job of putting it in perspective. He's like, the total budget is $20 trillion a year. So $200 billion is about 1% of the GDP over the next decade. And while $200 billion is not a small amount of money, it's not enough, but also you got to look deeper as to what Trump is saying. So one of the things he released that is during the Russia thing, you know, call me Russia, Russia. So he released this thing, you know, some people think, oh, he was trying to divert from the Russia talk, but, you know, or is the Russia talk trying to show us that he's not going to spend much money on infrastructure? Also, what he proposes, and this is a big thing from the right especially, but we're going to privatize it. The government doesn't know what they're doing. We're going to privatize. And there's just so many examples that this guy goes into, like Chicago, where I'm from originally. They privatized, younger Mayor Daley privatized the parking meters. And I was living in Chicago when this happened, and all of a sudden there's parking meters everywhere, and they extended the hours. You were getting tickets all the time. Like, you couldn't park anywhere without it was just because a corporation is not about what's in the best interest of the populace. I understand parking meters are a revenue stream for cities. And even certain types of parking tickets are a part of that. Some parking tickets are for a safety issue. If you're blocking a fire hydrant or whatever, okay, that's a safety issue. That's what that ticket is, a deterrent, so you don't block that. But a lot of parking tickets are just revenue streams. So they said, let's privatize it. And they sold the revenue to Morgan Stanley, and of course, Morgan Stanley benefited, but living in Chicago sucked. It basically was like, don't use a car. There's other examples of privatization that he goes into. So again, now where I live in California, Southern California, well, all of California, but mainly Southern California has always had a bad traffic problem. So they came up with, let's do some toll roads. They privatized the toll roads. And one of the toll roads I've used when I've driven south, like down into San Diego, like whatever, to go to Comic-Con or surfing or do shows or whatever, and there is a toll road and it's quicker and it costs you some money. But what happened, they then were trying to do other things to relieve, the state was trying to do other things to relieve the gridlock, commuter trains and stuff like that. There was a clause in the contract that said you're in direct competition with this privatized toll road. They're a corporation. So now they have a monopoly and they couldn't build stuff, which shows you how the privatization is just, it's another excuse for corporations to make money and squeeze people out. The big thing Jeremy Corbyn was talking about, he wanted to have the government take back over the train system. Under Margaret Thatcher, she privatized. Margaret Thatcher, big Reagan person, she was anti-union, she was brutal. Anti-working person. She privatized the railway system. So here's the problem with that. A railway system or water or utilities, so they always talk about privatization is good. Let the market decide, right? Competition's good. There's only one railroad track. There's only one water pipeline. There's only one utility source. There's only one place, right? So competition is good, sure, when you're in a store or something, or you go online and compare and contrast. That's good, but there's not like there's 7 railroad tracks and you choose the most efficient and best price one. So what did they do? You got to ride the train in the UK. We're going to jack up the price. The toll road people did that in Southern California. They jacked up the toll road price. You want to get out of traffic, you got to pay us, because corporations have one thing: get as much profit as possible. They're not about the greater good. Governments, in their initial inception, or in their purest, most noble form, is to be equal for everybody, to make things more efficient. Public transportation is so people that can't afford cars, that kids, teenagers can't drive yet, the elderly, someone with a disability, they can get around, they can go to work, they can go to a doctor's appointment, they can go to whatever, and that's what public transportation is. That's why a lot of public transportation is highly subsidized. One of the things this guy recommends, he's like, what if we had one day of free buses just to encourage people to take it? Because of the subsidies, they could afford to do that. So it just shows, again, all Trump has done since he's gotten into office is privatize, deregulate, privatize. But this has been happening for decades. Privatize the prison system. So what do they need? The prison system? They need more criminals. So you better go out there and start arresting people. The 3 strikes you're outlaw. That's great for the private prison industry, which was way behind that when Clinton signed that into action. Well, we got to, marijuana. We got to send people into jail for a plant. So what this is showing, and it's a good interview I suggest watching, because this guy, Dean Baker's pretty articulate in the points he's getting across. But it also shows you, again, tying this in, since he brought up Jeremy Corbyn, it ties in, Corbyn, while he didn't win, Labour won a bunch of seats. I'm not entirely clear about the UK system, but one thing is for certain that I do understand: he was predicted to get crushed. The Labour Party in the UK was predicted to get crushed, and they didn't. And because people were like, yeah, this isn't right. We need social services. And again, it's all tied back to money and privatization and all this other stuff. If we get real progressives in office, we could have high-speed rail from coast to coast. Every city could have amazing public transportation. Now, I live in California, in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles, when I first moved here 20 years ago, was known for having awful public transportation. In the last 10, 15 years or so, it's actually gotten better. They've extended the light rail to go all the way into downtown, which saves me time when I go down there because of traffic and all that. And I try to take more public transportation because the city I live in has decent public transportation, and I think we should spend more money on that. Again, you put actual money into the infrastructure, you're doing several things. You're feeding the economy, because local, Americans have to build these roads and all this other stuff, and rail lines. You're also then making society better. Privatization, I'm so done with it. It's so bad. It's bad for everybody. It's only good for the corporations, and they don't give a shit. And this is about a quality of life issue. And Trump, of course, he is, he talked at this big game, and my system's going to be the best, and it's more nonsense. It's more stuff we should be paying attention to. And it's more like, they're really, people weren't talking about, hey, we need socialism. We need to get rid of capitalism. That wasn't getting a lot of traction 10 years ago, 5 years ago even. Now people are like, you know what? Fuck this. This is capitalism run amok. We need socialism. Because, as I've said before, if you're afraid of socialism, then you're afraid of public transportation. You're afraid of street cleaning. You're afraid of the fire department. You're afraid of public schools. You're afraid of libraries. You're afraid of clean roads and streets that you can ride on for free. You're afraid of public schools. So we need real progressives to get in here to back And any privatization is bullshit. Always know this. Privatization only helps the companies, the corporations that are making money from it. It does not help. Any politician that tells you that is being paid by them. And just fucking call them out. Anytime they say that, it's because they're getting money from that industry or that corporation. It's complete nonsense. So thank you, AlexTalk, for backing the show. Folks, if you go to patreon.com, the link below, you get your name. You see all those people's names in the credits at the end of the videos. You get that. You get to suggest videos. You get bonus content. I'm releasing episode 3 of the podcast, and you get bonus video. You get a bunch of cool stuff, and you're supporting the show. And we're getting close. Because of the support from you guys, I've been able to start doing a podcast now. More support from you means I'll be able to start I'm looking into getting a video screen and a new laptop and all this stuff that's going to make the show better because you folks keep supporting it. And I'm going to keep bringing the truth, the progressive truth. They're trying to squander us and shove us into a corner. But there's like a handful of progressive people out there, and they're starting to become 2 handfuls now. That's what we got to do. Get more progressive, spread the word. And when anyone talks about privatization or Trump's new infrastructure, it's all bullshit. Thanks for watching the show. Likes and subscribes and shares will help the show grow.